Hey Dungeons & Dragons community, Treantmonk here. I love D&D, and 5th edition is my favorite edition by far, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. And I think we all think a couple adjustments could make things even better. I've done a series of those adjustments I'm going to be providing to anyone who wants them. There's no cost for them, so feel free to access them, download them, share them, and use them. In these videos, I will be explaining how these adjustments work and why I made any decisions I made for the changes. Today I'm going to be going through my changes to the wizard. As always, a link to the document is in the video description for your convenience, and that document contains a link back to this video. Now, the wizard is, in my opinion, the most powerful class in Dungeons & Dragons, so you might think that it doesn't need any adjustments at all. And I certainly don't think it needs a power boost at all as a class. But I do think that there are a few abilities that some of the subclasses get that could be reworked. I also think the capstone for the wizard isn't particularly flavorful or interesting, and it doesn't really fit my view of a wizard or fit with the variants I've done so far, where I've made capstones more powerful, more interesting. And I also find that there's certain subclasses where they have abilities that might be really powerful or not powerful, depending on how you interpret them, and I didn't want that. I would rather have it just be clear exactly what the ability does. And there are some subclasses that I think don't match up to the other subclasses. And I don't think it improves the wizard overall if I just bring those subclasses closer to the level of the other subclasses. We already know that things like the diviner, the enchanter, they're already the most powerful subclasses for wizard. And so if we look at things like the transmuter, for example, bringing it closer to those, I don't think makes wizards more powerful. I just think it makes those subclasses a better option for wizards and gives you more creativity as a player to make an effective wizard using different subclasses to get kind of the flavor of the kind of wizard you want to be. So those were the things I thought about as I went into this variant. And the changes we see are going to be with that in mind. So let's get started. So this is the Wizard, the Treantmonk Variant, and before we get going, I really actually want to thank the various members of my Discord who've been helping me out with these variants. For those of you who think I'm coming up with all this on my own, the reality is that I am using my members of the Discord to kind of bounce ideas off of, and they give me ideas in return, and I have members on that Discord who do the mathematical calculations for me, they'll graph damage for me, so that I can make sure that these things fit with each other in a balanced way. So I just wanted to, before I get started, I've not thanked these people up to now, and I definitely want to thank you all. I'm not going to name you all by names because it's a lot of different people, and I want to thank you all for all the help you give me. So this is the Wizard, the Treantmonk Variant. We begin with our class chart as normal, and our class features, and the base class features, there's not going to be any changes. In fact, as you would imagine, there's not going to be very many changes in the base wizard at all. So Arcane Recovery is the same, Arcane Traditions gained at the same point, ability score improvements at the normal points, Spell Mastery is the same at 18th level the first, and only change to the base wizard is the capstone. So gone is signature spells, instead we're going to have Archmage. When you reach 20th level, your ability to weave magic to suit your whim becomes unparalleled. You may cast a wizard spell of 1st through 5th level, even if it is not prepared, whether or not it appears in your spellbook, and as long as you have the spell slot to do so. You must provide components of the spell as normal. You can use this feature a number of times, equal to your intelligence modifier, minimum of once. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So unlike signature spells, which kind of pins you down to a couple spells, Archmage is really fulfilling the idea of a wizard as a versatile spellcaster. And if you remember my sorcerer variant, I went the other direction. Sorcerers are the ultimate in spell specialists. They're really good at spamming specific spells over and over again. So what I wanted to do with wizard is go the other direction. So wizards are no longer getting additional castings with their 20th level ability. Instead, what they're able to do is change their spells so that they have much more spell versatility than they had before. Still, I think a very effective capstone. In some ways, it's technically a debuff because they are actually getting less castings than they had before. But I think in the way that's important, it's a big buff, and that is in spell versatility. But remember, it will only be 1st through 5th level spells, so we're not talking about the ultimate power spells. So the main work I did was with the arcane traditions, and every single subclass in the player's handbook got at least one change from the player's handbook version. But many of them, especially the ones that are considered more powerful or more effective, only got that one change. So we'll start off with what that one change is with our School of Abjuration. School of Abjuration is a good subclass. I didn't think it needed a boost at all. But the thing I changed for every subclass was the first ability they get, which is the 2nd level ability, the Savant ability based on their subclass. And they're all going to be the same. So what the Savant abilities for the subclasses would do before is they would allow you to take a spell from your school and you could copy it into your spellbook for cheaper and faster. And although that's not a terrible ability, I didn't think it was a good ability because I thought it did exactly the opposite of what you would want it to do. Because if I'm playing an Abjurer, I should be picking Abjuration spells with my level ups. But with the way the Savant ability worked, I was actually better off not taking Abjuration spells, hoping that I might get them from some other source because I can copy them cheaper and faster into my spellbook. So the only advantage I got with those Savant abilities was for spells of the tradition I picked if I didn't take them. So again, not a useless ability, but I think what it accomplished was the opposite of what we want to do. We want to encourage Abjurers to take Abjuration spells. We want to encourage Conjurers to take Conjuration spells. So I have adjusted these abilities so it does exactly that. Beginning when you select this school at 2nd level, you may use an action to change a prepared Abjuration spell for another spell of the Abjuration school in your spellbook. Once you use this feature, you may not do so again until you finish a long rest. This isn't a powerful ability. In fact, it might be less powerful than the original Savant abilities, but what it does do is it encourages you to have multiple Abjuration spells in your spellbook. So when we're selecting our free spells at level up, it is advantageous for an Abjurer to pick Abjuration spells. It is advantageous for a Diviner to pick Divination spells. So although this isn't a power-up, what I think it does do is it enhances the flavor of the subclass that we've picked. Other than that, Abjuration is a good school, so I didn't think it needed any adjustments at all. That brings us to the School of Conjuration, which will also have the Savant ability. All these subclasses will have this same ability for the School of Magic for which they specialize. But School of Conjuration had another one that I thought needed to be changed, and that was their base 2nd level ability. They used to have Minor Conjuration, and it could create a non-magical object, but it wasn't really clear what kind of objects you could create. Could you create spell components? Could you create a diamond that could be used in a resurrection spell? If so, it was an incredibly powerful ability. If not, then it wasn't a powerful ability. And it was vague on whether you could or not. So it was just one of those abilities that I thought just needed to be changed. And I thought about things that would be thematic for Conjurers, and one thing that Conjurers do is summon. And a spell that most low-level wizards are going to have is Find Familiar. So I thought something to do with Find Familiar would be the way to go. So instead of Minor Conjuration, a Conjurer will get Improved Familiar at 2nd level. Starting at 2nd level, you add the Find Familiar spell to your spellbook if it's not there already. If you already know the Find Familiar spell, you may choose another Wizard Conjuration spell of 1st level instead. And I tend to do this with the abilities in my variants. If it's going to give you a spell or a skill or a proficiency of another kind, if you already have it, I'm going to let you pick something else instead. If your familiar has an intelligence of 5 or less, which pretty much every familiar is, but just in case other things come out later on, its intelligence becomes 6, and it gains the ability to understand one language of your choice that you speak. You can also dismiss your familiar at any time as an action, causing it to disappear. You may have it reappear as an action anywhere within 30 feet of you. You can communicate telepathically with your familiar and perceive through your familiar senses as long as you are on the same plane of existence. So what we've done is we've made familiars a little bit better. And familiars were already good. And the ways we've made them better aren't huge, because, again, we don't want to make it broken. But I do think these are things that we would like to have as a wizard. I would love, as a wizard, to be able to just pop my familiar out of his existence and then bring it back later, especially if I'm going into a situation where I thought it might die. And generally, wizards can't do that. They would just have to cast the ritual again afterwards. So this kind of thing, I think, is flavorful and fun. And then the ability to communicate telepathically at a longer range, I think, is more effective, especially considering the familiar is now going to have a better intelligence score. So I think then it gives us some other options for a familiar. I'm not sure this is as powerful a second level ability as some other subclasses get, but it is one that I would still like to have, and it is a reason why I would consider to play a conjurer. Other than that, the conjuration abilities I think are quite good, and I didn't change them at all. The School of Divination, of course, I changed Divination Savant as I changed all the Savant abilities, but the School of Divination is fantastic. All the abilities are good. It didn't need any changes at all. Same thing with the School of Enchantment, so there's not any changes at all. The School of Evocation, again, the evocation savant, and I made one other change, and that was with potent cantrip. It was just one of those feel bad abilities. What it would do is if you were casting a cantrip that would have a save and you would take no damage, if you made that save, it would take half damage instead. Didn't work well with evocation cantrips that tended to require an attack roll, not a saving throw, so it didn't really fit with the class, and it's kind of a crappy ability. So what I've got now is, starting at 6th level, your mastery of elemental damage allows you to alter your damaging cantrips. Whenever you cast a cantrip that deals a type of damage from the following list, you can change that damage type to one of the other listed types: acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder. Again, this is still not a powerful ability. I'm not looking to power up the Evoker. Evoker's okay. But what it does do is it is going to allow us to use this ability with cantrips we likely have. We're likely going to have a cantrip like Firebolt or Ray of Frost. And now we can use that, and we can alter the damage type, which kind of fits with the flavor of the Evoker. Otherwise, I didn't make any other changes to the Evoker. School of Illusion is a subclass I think is pretty good. Again, all I've changed is the Savant ability. Now, the School of Necromancy, I'd consider one of the weaker subclasses, and there's a couple reasons for that. The first is I thought the Grim Harvest ability didn't work super well, and the second thing is that necromancy spells, for some reason, tend to be less effective than other spells of the same level. And Grim Harvest would kind of pull you into those spells because you would get a greater benefit from it if you are using a necromancy spell. So what I want to do here is just kind of preview that I will be going into spells, and I'll be doing some adjustments for spells, and I'm going to address the issue with necromancy spells at that time. So I didn't think it needed to be changed here, but I just want you to know that necromancy spells are something I'm going to deal with, and I'm not going to deal with it by just making the necromancy subclass more powerful. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is making necromancy spells in line with other spells of their level. But I did make one other change to Grim Harvest. So once per turn, when you kill one or more creatures with a spell of 1st level or higher, you're now gaining temporary hit points equal to twice the spell's level, or 3 times if it's a necromancy spell. And before, it was you would heal hit points. I think temporary hit points fits a little bit better thematically, considering we're pulling life force and gaining ourselves, because if we're not wounded, then it wouldn't do anything for us. But now it does. We're pulling in that life force and gaining a benefit from it. And healing tends not to be what wizards are about. Usually when wizards are buffing somebody's hit points, they're doing so with temporary hit points. So that kind of fit more in line with that as well. And then we finish up with the School of Transmutation. This is what I consider generally the weakest of the wizard subclasses, and I did want to adjust it. Now, Transmutation Savant, again, got the same changes as all the other subclasses. Now, Minor Alchemy, I considered changing it altogether. Instead, I decided just to enhance it a little bit. And what I've done to enhance it basically is I've just added in a couple additional things that you can alter. So now, starting at second level, when you select this school, you can temporarily alter the physical properties of one non-magical object, changing it from one substance to another. You can perform a special alchemical procedure on one object composed entirely of crystal, wood, stone but not gemstone, iron, steel, copper, glass, or silver, transforming it into a different one of those materials. For each 10 minutes you spend performing the procedure, you can transform up to 1 cubic foot of the material. After 1 hour, or until you lose your concentration, as if you were concentrating on a spell, the material reverts to its original substance. With minor alchemy, whenever I talked about it not being overly effective, I was usually told the same thing. It can be useful to change something like a wall or a door or the bars of your cell into a substance that you can more easily break through. So what they would talk about is if you were in a cell and you had iron bars, then you switch them to wood, and then you can crack through the wood, thus allowing you to escape the cell. Or, for example, if you were up against an iron door, you could change part of it to wood, and then you could beat through the wood and thus get through the door. I had two issues with that. The first was that number one, sometimes it's steel, not iron. And if it's steel, then it wouldn't work. The second issue I had with that is you turn a door into wood. If it's a thick door, that's not necessarily easy to break through. I mean, most doors are wood. Most reinforced doors are still mostly wood. So being able to change a little bit of it into wood, I didn't think gave the advantage that was often talked about. But if you can change into glass, and if steel is one of the options, then it opens up minor alchemy for exactly the uses that I was told about. So I added in crystal, I added in steel, and I added in glass. And I just think that gives you some new options with minor alchemy that you didn't have before. So it could do the things that people would talk about. Now, Transmuter's Stone is already a good ability, and I didn't change it at all. But Shape Changer was a terrible ability, and I totally wanted to change that one. What it would normally do is it would allow you to cast Polymorph for free, and you would get it in your spellbook if you didn't have it there already. Of course, if you're 10th level and a Transmuter, I would hope you would already have it there already, in which case you get nothing. And then you can only cast it on yourself, and only to become a challenge rating 1 or lower creature. So only for the most basic utility could you use this ability. And even then, I mean, when you are using Polymorph, it's not like Wild Shape. You're not getting your class abilities. You're not getting your racial abilities. You're not getting your mental abilities. So I didn't even think it was overly good for utility. Not even as good as Wild Shape is, which is a second level ability. So I definitely wanted to change this. But I did like the idea of tying it to Polymorph. So now, at 10th level, you add the Polymorph spell to your spellbook, if it's not there already. If you already have the Polymorph spell, you may select another Wizard Transmutation spell of a level you can cast. You can cast Polymorph without expending a spell slot. When you do so, you can target only yourself, and your concentration on the spell cannot be broken as a result of taking damage. Once you cast Polymorph in this way, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. That's the same as before, though you can still cast it normally using an available spell slot. So I've removed the one challenge rating limitation, and I've added in that you won't lose your concentration as a result of taking damage. This means you can now cast it as a buff to turn into a T-Rex in the middle of a combat, and instead of being a wizard for a few rounds, you can go in and start biting stuff and hitting stuff with your tail, and that's fun. Right? And it's not overpowered. At level 10, anything you can polymorph into isn't super effective anymore. So we're not talking about polymorph at level 7. This is polymorph at level 10, and it's only on yourself. So I do think that this adds a lot of flavor to this ability, but I don't think it is in a range where we need to worry about it being overpowered. And then finally, of course, if you already have polymorph in your spellbook, which you almost certainly do, then at least you don't get screwed. You can take another spell instead. And then the Master Transmuter ability, which is a reasonably good ability, mainly because Panacea is a really good ability. Starting at 14th level, you can use your action to consume the reserve transmutation magic stored within your Transmuter Stone in a single burst. When you do so, choose one of the following effects. Your Transmuter Stone is destroyed and can't be remade until you finish a long rest. Major Transformation, super circumstantial, but it's fine. It's okay to be on there. Panacea is fantastic, always has been. You remove all curses, diseases, poisons affecting a creature you touch with the Transmuter Stone, and it regains all its hit points. That is significantly better than a heal spell. Restore Youth, again, is only flavor. You touch the Transmuter Stone to a willing creature, their apparent age is reduced by 3d10 years. It doesn't affect or extend the creature's lifespan. The only one I've changed is Restore Life. Restore Life, what it would do before is it would give you the ability to cast the Raise Dead spell. Now, that could be useful if you are in a party that doesn't have Raise Dead at 14th level, then that would give you an ability to get that. But that's not going to be the case most of the time. Most of the time, somebody in your party already has some form of resurrection magic. I want it to be somehow special. So now a creature you touch with the Transmuter Stone is brought back to life as if a Raise Dead spell was cast on it, without expending a spell slot or needing to have the spell in your spellbook. So the difference here is instead of giving you the ability to cast Raise Dead, which would imply that you would have to complete all the things involved in a Raise Dead, including a 1 hour casting time, including a material component that you may or may not have, instead, when you touch a creature with this, they get the Raise Dead spell instantly. So it's the one action to use this ability, and Raise Dead happens. So this definitely got a boost, but I thought it was a boost that was in line with what Panacea could already do, and it's more in line with what other subclasses could do at 14th level. And that is all the changes I made to the wizard. So again, most of the wizard remains the same. Wizard's always been really powerful, remains really powerful. I didn't make it more powerful, I don't think. But what I did do is I encouraged you that when you take a subclass that revolves around a specific school, as all the subclasses in the player's handbook do, I'm encouraging you to take spells from that school. That's the main difference I made. The other thing is Necromancer gets temporary hit points instead of regular hit points, because I don't see a Necromancer wizard as being a healer. I see them more as stealing life. And I gave a few boosts to the Transmutation wizard that I thought were required. And I changed a conjuration ability that was a little bit vague on how powerful it was, and just turned it into something that was useful and fun, but not overly powerful. And that's it. That's the wizard. And I only have one more class to do. That's the rogue. I'm going to do that next week. Then following that, I will be getting into some other basic rules. I'll be talking a little bit about races. I'm going to be reworking feats and spells. So all those things are still coming up. Lots of variants yet to come. So until then, I'm going to sit back, relax, have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you next week.